Welcome to the Crafty Mini, and in this one we're going to be painting up the Lord of Plagues for Warhammer. A nice little miniature. It's got some really cool details and some other little gruesome bits on it. This is a part 1, so we're going to paint the miniature in its entirety in this part, and then the second part next week's going to be something a bit cool that we're doing with it. But to start off, you can see here, so it's had just a simple black undercoat, and then I've done some camo green by Procryl, just watered down on all of the skin and the flesh. And then, because I want to keep that green hue, all I've done is mixed in some ivory into that camo green to give this this greenish sort of off-white. All I'm doing here is a thin down layer of the paint and just scratchily putting it on, because he's got all these cool little pustules and little bits of detail in his skin that we're going to be picking out, and just going around now and just picking it all out, leaving a bit of that green initial layer on the underside as well, and you'll see how we build up all the layers on this. And you can see here that colour shade that's left at the end, so this is really like a creamy sort of sage. Going to go in again, because the first coat was very, very thin, going in again with the exact same paint again, also thinned down, and just to build up a bit of that opacity, and just going in and hitting certain areas. So around the sort of breaks in his skin, there are these flaps, picking all those out, anything that's upward facing as well, just to build up the contrast on the miniature, and just going around and picking all these little bits out. Because the paint on the first clip you'd have seen, it goes on and it looks quite bright, and then obviously when it's dry it does tone down a lot, and the ivory is desaturating it. This is why we're going to go in and do a second highlight with this paint before we push and add more of the ivory in to go ahead and then build up more opacity on the skin. You can see I'm not being too neat with it, and not being very deliberate, but just very scratchy going around. It's only really where the fold of his belly, the sort of, and the gut part, that'll get a bit more of a smoother transition, and then on the miniature, these parts of his legs, I think it could actually be just fabric, but I decided to paint them skin as if he's almost naked under this weird chainmail loincloth, because he's just bursting from the seams. And then the overall miniature, when you see it, it does look cool. It looks really grotesque and gnarly. These preceding layers of highlight we're going to be doing, we're going to warm them up, add a bit of warmth to the skin, which we'll do in a future step, which you'll see as well. Right, so for the next part of this, because I wanted to give a bit of warmth, what I've done is I've got some Resin flesh shade, but I've heavily watered this down. This is like 3:1, maybe a touch more water to actual wash, and when it goes on, again, it looks quite stark in contrast. But because the way the washes work, and they'll go into all the recesses, so it just very gently tints the skin, but goes into the recesses and adds this little bit of warmth, this bit of life into what's otherwise sort of like undead flesh. And it's a really nice contrast with that sage green in it. There are some bits where you'll still see the sage green come through, but it's a really, as I say, really nice contrast, and it gives that bit of warmth to the flesh, and just makes it look a bit more gruesome because that green hue is still coming through. So it's almost like it starts to look now like almost normal flesh with a sickly, that sickly sage green coming through, and just really sets the skin tone off really nicely, I think. Right, so at this point I'm happy with the flesh. It might get another few little spot highlights here and there as needed, but now we're going to work on the armour. So everything's base coated silver, and then same principle as I did with the skin, because I still want a bit of that silver showing through. So thin down some green paint, that sort of traditional Nurgle colour, which I've just mixed from a few paints in my in the Procryl range, and I'm just going through and scratchily adding these on again. So exactly the same as we did with the skin. So it'll still cover the silver, but you're not going to get full opacity as if you put a fresh layer of paint on. So a bit of the silver will still show through. I'm also, on certain sharp edges, I'm not going to go right up to the edge of the armour, just so it looks like the armour's a bit worn, chipped and cracked. And then on the miniature, there's these really nice sort of like pop marks, which will accentuate later with some rust paint as well. But again, leaving those spare, just so it looks like the armour's battered and worn and things like that. So exactly the same process as the skin, and just building up on all the armour plates. So it'll be both of the boots, the shoulder pad, There's some little circles on his loincloth at the front, his one sort of bracer, and then the helmet will all get the exact same layer. So you can see here the armour's done, and then it married up with the actual, that hint of green that's still coming through the skin. Now with the Nurgle armours, because I'm going to darken them down with a wash, what I like to do with that Nurgle green is hit them with a really bright green highlight layer, because I know I'm going to knock all that back again with the dark wash that I'll be putting on. So this one, like we did with the skin, a bit more sparingly, hitting just the raised areas, making sure I leave some of that previous green and some of the silver from the base coat on there, and just working my way around. With this stuff like this, you've got to sort of trust the process, and it's one of those where practice makes perfect. I've done this for years with any sort of like decrepit armours with different colours and things, because I know the wash is going to really knock this back. I don't mind the fact that it looks really yellowy green and garish at the moment, and it's quite almost looks like it's the wrong sort of style that matches with the flesh that we've done. But you can see there on the first greave, it's actually started to come down a little bit already as it's drying. So it's a case of just trusting the process and going with it, because as I say, when we wash this, it's going to really knock it back, and it's going to keep that sort of Nurgle greeny colour whilst it's looking all mucky and gnarly, like this guy's been running around in a swamp and things like that. And just before I go into what I'm doing here with the wash and what I'm using, you can see now the green hue that's still there in the skin is sort of marrying up and reflecting with the green on the armour as well, and it hopefully it's reading well on camera, because it looks really disgusting and grotesque. But as I mentioned in the previous clip, we're going to knock back that really bright green now. So this is a mix proprietary called Sally's Grime. For those who've been long viewers of the channel, you'll know what it is, but it's basically a mix of one pot of Agrex Earth Shade, one pot of Norn Oil, just because I found that the newer Norn Oil isn't as good as the old one, and the Agrex just gives it a bit of a muckier colour. And then inside there's about half a pot of Dracoth Flesh, I think it's called, the contrast paint, just to give it a bit more stickiness and makes it flow a little bit better and gives it a bit more of a mucky colour. Really good on chainmails and armours and things, just to mucky them up. But one thing to note is because of it has to go on quite heavy, and because of especially the Dracoth Flesh, it stains a lot more than a normal wash would do. That's why I make a point of pre-highlighting any areas, like in this case the green armour, with a really light green, just so when it does dry you still get the nice contrast from dark to light on the raised areas, but it really muckies it up and it leaves this really gross sort of grimy sort of finish. Now another thing to note as well is if you want them to look a bit more matte, the areas, then you will have to put some varnish on top, because the contrast paint that's in there does dry very glossy, same as if you've got the gloss Norn Oil as well. But yeah, really nice paint, and it just, as I say, knocks back that green and just gives it loads more character, runs into all the recesses and everything exactly as you want a wash to do. But it's a cool little addition to your sort of painted arsenal. Right, so for the horns coming out the shoulder pads, the one out the side of his head, and also a couple of the straps and the handle for the actual axe. This is something I like to do. Now, obviously you can go and use brown paints of various shades and things. What I tend to do is I'll put a little bit of brown on the wet palette, but I'll mix in some of the greens in this case and some of the other colours that I've been using, just so they all marry together and they're all reading as similar sort of hues and shades. And then all I do is just add a little bit of that ivory to progressively get lighter and lighter for the tips of the actual spikes, and then to do some scratch sort of highlighting on the handle of the axe as well, to make it look a bit more like wood. Really simple way of working it. I do recommend it mixing the paints as well. You could just use like a dark brown, medium brown, light brown and so on, but it's just nice because it's the same as the mother colour theory, in that you use the same base colour in all of your tones, just to make everything pop a bit more and all marry together. And because I'm doing that on the palette, mixing whatever paints I've already used as well, it's the same sort of process. Again, looks very bright when it goes on, but it'll dry a lot darker and we'll wash it down anyway. And then here I've just left in a clip while I'm still finishing the same parts from previously. It's just to show you the variation in tones as you go up to the brighter colours. You can see there, especially on the big spikes on his shoulder, and because I'm just adding just a bit more ivory with each layer and just blending them up on those bits, it just makes it pop a bit more. Also, all the sort of entrails and gunky stuff are just going to get an ivory quick coat, because we're going to do some True Blood paint effects on there as well, just to pick them out, and they always look a bit starker and nastier when they're on a lighter base coat. Right, so annoyingly I forgot to press record, and you can see here I've done all the blood effects and the rust. While I'm going around varnishing the miniature now, mainly all the armour plates in a matte varnish, and then the satin on the skin, just to give it some variation in sort of texture. All it is the Army Painter True Blood sort of effects painter. That's it. I just put a bit of blodge of that on, and I work it through, put it on, make it look like it's speckled and sort of dripped everywhere. With the rust, it's just the Army Paint rust paint, slightly thinned down and just picking out certain spots, and then if I feel like I've gone too heavy I can go back in with the green. But the blood, the True Blood in particular, really does work. It looks lovely, really grotesque, and then if you water it down, you can still have a bit of that white layer that I had previously come through, which you can see on the actual bits of stomach that are showing. That's why it looks a little bit orangey and a bit brighter, and it's just a case of just adding more and more, and because it dries really glossy as well, you don't have to worry about varnishing with it at the end. And it just, again, when we've sat in the skin down and matted the armour down, it's really going to pop and look even more gruesome. And working away, and just sort of as you're putting it on, just think about realistically where the blood would drip and all the sort of juices and things that are actually coming out of this horrible creature. But you can see here, just working my way around anywhere that's the green armour plate is just getting this matte varnish, as I mentioned, just to dull it down a little bit, and it's all about sort of visual variation on the miniature, which you'll see in the final shots, and it just makes everything look a little bit more interesting than it actually is. This isn't a really sort of high-end paint job by myself, but it looks good, and for what I've got planned, because I'm waiting for something to arrive in the post, which you'll see next week for part 2 hopefully, if not the week after. You'll see what I'm going to do with this miniature and how we're going to build it all up. Right, and here he is all finished. Really happy with the way this has turned out. As I mentioned, a lot of the processes in this that adds all the textural variation and might sort of punches a little bit more. All it is, it's because of things like the scratchy watered down paints for the skin and the armour. So that those base coats originally show through, being a bit more sort of loose with it, a bit more free in the way that you paint. Also, obviously, the effect paints, the little bits of rust that are in his armour, and also the blood effects on the front of him. It just adds enough variation in texture, and then with the varnish on top, because it's just the armour plates and the flesh are the two main pieces of this, really make it shine and read really different on the miniature. When you're looking at it, and that's why it pops a little bit more than perhaps it would with just a traditional sort of base coat with layers and edge highlighting and things. Also with this, people who've watched the channel, this is my sort of style. I don't go for the traditional sort of GW edge highlighting stuff. I like to sort of branch out and do a few more things. But yeah, next week or the week after, look out for Lord of Plagues part 2, where we're going to base it up and do something cool with it. And we'll see you all on the next one. Cheers.